Red Dead Redemption and its eventual sequel Red Dead Redemption 2 are two of my favourite games of all time. They so perfectly combine what I love about games. Their intriguing, immersive, expansive open world, and a fantastic narrative linear story. But what makes these games and these stories hit, more so than the world, the themes, or the plots themselves, is the immense library of characters each game has. Side characters that become almost like family to the player over the course of the game, all providing wisdom and guidance of sorts to the two respective protagonists of each game. Of course though, these side characters would mean nothing without those protagonists. John Marston and Arthur Morgan. Two men who mirror each other in so many ways, two outlaws who follow similar paths of redemption, easily two of the most intricate and interesting characters ever put to the medium. Although both John and Arthur have sat near the top of my favourite characters list from the moment each respective game came out, it's always been difficult to pick between the two, and to truly make up my mind about which character stands higher in regard. So today, I decided to compare the two characters to see who I truly think is the best, or at least who's my favourite. Before we get into that though, it would really help me out if you could hit like, and if you're new here and end up enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on so you don't miss another one like it. And without further ado, let's take a look at John Marston and Arthur Morgan, and see who's truly the best Red Dead protagonist. And no, before someone comments, I'm not ranking Red Harlow, because it's Red Harlow. I mean, one of, if not the most vital thing in writing a compelling character is how that character is flawed. What makes them human, their imperfections and their failures. And this aspect is especially prevalent when it comes to these two men. Two killers, two outlaws, two characters almost defined by their flaws. In Arthur's case, we see from the start of the game a man who is selfless to a fault. Although yes, he robs, kills and does as he pleases, he does it not out of some mindless greed, but out of a devotion and loyalty to the man who took him in as a young man. Everything Arthur does is done not for himself, but for the sake of the gang, and of course, Dutch's endless array of plans. This loyalty, teetering on dogma, leads Arthur down a vicious, ruthless path, causing a man who's clearly caring and selfless to do heinous things, most aptly embodied by the debt collecting missions of Red Dead 2, as well as the general chaos and pain he causes in the world over the first 4 chapters of the game. By the time we meet him in Red Dead 2, Arthur's near given up on the idea of a normal life, on the life he could have had with Mary or with his son Isaac. His life is the gang, and no matter how many opportunities appear to leave that life, he's too blinded to see them until it's too late. John, when we see him in Red Dead 1, mirrors Arthur in a lot of ways. The two are roughly the same age, having been through so much in their past. However, John has far from lost hope. In fact, it's just about the only thing that pushes him forward. Hope for a normal life, hope for his family to be safe, hope to move on from the death and destruction his past has seen. John's biggest flaw though is that no matter how much he claims he wants to leave that life behind, it always seems to manifest itself in him. Part of John wants to leave the gang, even before it begins falling apart around him, but another part can't. Another part of him holds on to what him, Dutch, Arthur and Hosea once had. A part of him that knows nothing but the life of an outlaw, of a gunslinger. And I think it's made clear many times throughout Red Dead 2 especially, that in spite of his words, a part of John loves that life. But this of course takes him away from the life that's truly good for him. It causes John to constantly live 2 lives, to endlessly endanger his family, and to never be able to escape the cycle of death and vengeance that Arthur actively spoke out against. John's double life not only puts his family in harm's way, but it also leads Jack, his wholesome, intelligent son, to fall down the same violent path that both Arthur and himself did. The biggest difference between Arthur and John in this regard is that despite pursuing a seemingly greedy life, Arthur is inherently selfless. So much so that it becomes self-destructive. Whereas John, who has every opportunity to take the straight and narrow path, selfishly finds himself returning to violence, which although he usually justifies as being done for the greater good, often ends in more disaster following him.
So, you think I'm an idiot?
No, I know you're an idiot.
Although much of what makes a protagonist interesting manifests itself in their flaws, in Arthur and John's case, these flaws are brought to light by the people around them, their relationships. Of course, both John and Arthur have relationships with the gang of Red Dead 2, but thanks to his year-long absence, John was a far less intricate member of the gang's day-to-day goings-on, especially by the time of the Blackwater robbery. Arthur, on the other hand, stands as the main provider for the gang, the connection between the messiah figure of Dutch and the everyday folk that make up his family, and because of that, it's often Arthur who the gang open up to, ask for help, or generally spend time with. Whilst Arthur maintains this responsibility, it's his relationship with Hosea, Charles, Sadie, and eventually John that stand as the strongest, an almost father-son bond with Hosea Hosea built by the latter teaching Arthur how to read, write and live, a genuine friendship with Charles built on the two building each other morally and philosophically, a connection with Sadie through the horrendous grief both widows went through, and a brotherhood with John that's built due to the two men paralleling each other in so many ways. Of course, this is on top of the mass of other side characters Red Dead 2 holds, all of which are fleshed out, particularly in chapters 2 and 3, which further exemplifies Arthur's selflessness, his charisma, and his genuine love of people. John, on the other hand, is a far more inward-looking character, someone who focuses on a select few around him, and how he can bring the best to both them and himself. In this way, he has less natural, and oftentimes less positive relationships with those around him. However, this more nuanced approach to his relationships creates some fascinating dynamics in Red Dead 1, particularly between him and Dutch, Edgar Ross, Irish, Reyes, Landon Ricketts, and Sheriff Johnson. It goes without saying that John has his positive relationships with the likes of Bonnie, Abigail, and of course Arthur. However, in contrast to his big brother figure, John's most interesting relationships come when he's faced with vitriol, spite, villainy, degeneracy, or general distaste. Whilst Arthur seems to see the best in those around him, John, thanks to his trauma, his past betrayals, can't help but be doubtful of anything those around him say, constantly countering the abstract and contradictory statements of the villains that he faces with a kind of logic and intelligence that's clearly been built up through massive amounts of reflection. Although this aspect of John's character is done excellently in his first game though, I do feel Red Dead 2 slightly dropped the ball in terms of how John's perspective on the world was executed, with him often being presented as less outgoing or less caring due to either stupidity or selfishness, which not only creates some discontinuity in his character between each game, but also makes him far less interesting on a whole in the prequel.
You go.
We ain't got time for this, not now.
We ain't both gonna make it.
We can look at character traits, flaws, relationship dynamics all we want, but at the end of the day, a character is truly defined by the journey they go on. And in the case of Arthur and John, the focus of the arcs they go through are written straight on the cover of the game: redemption. Both men, lost as children, reborn into a life of crime, are able to transform their trauma, their affinity for violence and destruction, into something meaningful. For Arthur, we see a man lose his entire being to the life he believed would give him everything. We see him time and time again confronted with the contradictions of the philosophy he's followed since the time he was a boy, along with the lack of tangible outcomes that come from Dutch's many master plans. With not only his life, but his ideals, and in a way his soul being ripped away from him, Arthur has to face the existential fear brought upon him by his tuberculosis, and use it to push himself forward, to build himself into a better man, and to try to leave some positive imprint on the world before he's left to rot. Meanwhile, we see in John a somewhat less straightforward journey of redemption, filled with countless moments of failure, of selfishness. As opposed to Arthur, whose life's path is entirely upturned by specific key moments, John sees his life go through constant ups and downs that force him to make difficult decisions, and progressively build him into a better man over the span of nearly 15 years. Every time John believes himself to be close to redemption, yet another thing from his past comes up to try and tear him down, and this past eventually destroys him entirely, but not before he makes peace with that past. In Arthur, we see a completed tale of absolution, which ends in a man who's found true peace and in a way salvation. However, John's story is a reminder that no matter what we do, no matter how much better we make ourselves, the world will keep turning, life will go on, and there will always be another hardship to face. Although it may be a slightly less satisfying aspect from a narrative perspective, it definitely makes John feel like a somewhat more real character, less the grand redemptive hero and more a flawed man who's simply trying his best. And in that way, John stands out not only in this series, but in the entire spectrum of video game protagonists. The question is, does it make him a better character than his chronological predecessor? Of course, when it comes to character analysis, there is no one truth. And when it comes to storytelling, there is no one best way to do anything. The value of these characters exists purely out of players placing value onto them. So personally, despite an absolute adoration of Arthur Morgan, and despite Red Dead Redemption 2 being my favourite game of all time, after going in depth here, I think I have to rank John Marston a little bit higher. Although I do think Arthur's story is perhaps more clear and distinct in its themes and its arc, I can't help but be fascinated by the constant inner conflict of John, in both the original game and its prequel. It may not follow the monomyth in the same way, and it may not be as satisfying a journey. Personally, I find it to be a slightly more reflective character journey, which in all fairness is massively influenced and improved upon by the existence of Arthur's story. But of course, it goes without saying that both of these characters are iconic in their own right. And for that reason, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who disagree with me. So if you do, or if you agree with me, let me know why in the comments down below. And whilst you're down there, like I said, it would really be appreciated if you could hit like. And if you're new here and you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe with post notifications turned on. And with all that being said, I do hope you enjoyed the video. I've been Joe, aka Found Scarab, and I will see you in the next one.